interrupted by my power going out for a few seconds. So that's frustrating. But here we are back. I think that it was kind of a fun coincidence that we had only just started a new part of the discussion, and so it's kind of, it's just as easy to go ahead and swing back into our new topic, which is I'm actually also just realizing that the way I've got the cameras aimed right now, it makes me look like I'm sitting way shorter than you at the same table or something. Like,
like that.
In any event, we were just about to talk in depth about Black Panther, and in particular, I had asked you which of the previous Marvel movies have you seen, and I can list the ones that are Marvel if you are in need of that information.
Just happened.
Are you still there? I'm here. I see you.
Okay.
Everything flickered for a second, but
no, we're together.
Okay. My internet, it's possible, may be still hiccuping a little bit as it boots back up. Hopefully not too much, but we'll see. So, did you need a refresher over which movies are Marvel movies and which are not?
That was where I was going with it when you
I
said that. I'm not sure which Marvel movies I've seen. So, I know I've seen Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm. Not Marvel.
Okay, not Marvel. I saw one of the Iron Mans.
That's Marvel.
I'm not
There's
sure.
There's three
which
of those now, not to mention the other ones that he's been in.
It was one of those.
Hmm.
That may be it.
So we've also got the Captain America movies, we've got the Thor movies, we've got the Avengers movies, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man Homecoming.
Nope.
Nope. And Guardians of the Galaxy.
Nope.
All right. Yep. So, so you've seen one of the Iron Man movies.
Whichever one of the Iron Mans I saw is my only Marvel movie.
Do you remember anything about that one?
He has like the heart thing where the iron keeps him from dying. Or the iron's going to kill him and the radiation keeps him from dying. I don't remember what it is.
Okay, so it's that sounds like it might be that 2 is the one that you saw, which is kind of funny just because I think it's sometimes regarded as the least of the 3.
Yeah.
Not that it's bad, but just compared to the others.
That feels like the one I saw. Is that the one where there's like a big scene on a racetrack?
Yes, that's definitely Iron Man 2.
That's all I've seen.
Right. So, without trying to shame you for not having seen all of these movies, what I will say briefly is, at this point, there are so many that I could definitely see that as sort of a daunting task, the idea of trying to get caught up, and probably not really necessary. But that said, I think they're all really good, and I think you would enjoy any of them that you did watch. So,
well, and I think part of the problem with the dauntingness of it is that when you see one come on, like you'll see, next up on whatever TNT or whatever channel or Netflix, it's Thor XYZ, and I'm like, I have no idea. Like, can I watch that? Am I going to be missing because I missed Thor ABC?
Right. So
and that's the daunting part. It's not just like the sheer time. It's that even in the casual times when I could watch them, I have no idea. Like, if it wasn't for the memes, I wouldn't even realize that Infinity War was like the most recent Avengers. Because I see Avengers all the time on my TV, and I'm like, I don't want to know if I want to get into that because I may not understand it.
So here's what I'll say, actually, is I'd say don't worry about that. Just see any of them that are interesting to seem at all interesting to you.
But I don't know if they are. They're just titles.
Well, okay, what I'm saying is don't worry about having seen other ones of them. If one comes up and you're curious, feel free to check it out without having to worry that you haven't seen the others. That's what I'm saying.
Got it.
So they all do a pretty good job of letting you know anything you really need to know. Now, obviously, there will be information that you won't have if you haven't seen the others, but I don't think any of it will leave you really that confused, honestly. Even Infinity War, which is the biggest and most complex capstone of this whole Marvel Cinematic Universe thing that they've done so far. It's got a lot of characters in it. You won't know all of them or what their deal is necessarily, but all you need to know is how the other characters are reacting to what happens. That's really, it's like, oh, look, there's a guy, and he's being threatened with death. Do the characters we know are good guys seem sad or happy or what? They seem sad. Okay, so that's the guy we're sad about. He's dying now. The movie covers what you need to know. This is what I'm saying.
Hey, stop.
That said, I think obviously any of the first in the series would be, are the best places to jump in if you want to know all of the continuity, but you really don't need it. But Black Panther is one of the ones that is, at least right now, still just standalone. It's by itself. It doesn't have, Black Panther 2, 3, 4, or whatever, although they're going to make a sequel. So that one certainly is one that could be viewed more easily separate. Even though it is not the first Marvel movie that has Black Panther in it. He was introduced in Captain America: Civil War. And so it's just a perfect example of how you really don't have to have seen the others. So in Black Panther, one of the things that happens at the beginning is he's reflecting on how his father was killed, right? In a terrorist attack, right? That attack happens in the previous movie. So it tells you what you need to know. But let's brush all of that aside, because I think what is something that's definitely worth talking about with this movie is how you, who have not seen all of the other Marvel movies and are not therefore already in the bag for any Marvel superhero movie that comes out, you saw that one. So yes. Tell us how that happened.
I mean, the movie reached like a critical cultural mass of this is a thing you should see. Like, you should be a part of seeing what this movie is about. And so we chose to go and watch it. Like, it was like, how could every channel that we're sort of like where we sort of get information, all focused on, which is not the same with any of the other Marvel movies, said, go see this movie. Go see this movie. This became a cultural event, not just it's going to be a really good movie. Like, this was something that you wanted to be a part of the same way you wanted to be a part of making sure that you watch the Super Bowl live, or, like that. I mean, that's what this became. And it delivered. I mean, it not in a cultural revelation for me, but I mean, for whatever all of the things that it got right that got it to that point, it delivered a great movie when you get there, which only just amplifies that.
Yeah. I think all of that is true. I agree with it completely, and I think that is the response for anyone who rolls their eyes at the idea of a superhero movie getting a Best Picture nomination, or the suggestion that somehow it's only getting it's getting like a pity nomination to appease whoever. I think that's silly. This is a movie that became a cultural touchstone for a lot of people, and bringing in a much wider audience than these movies have tended to do, and especially when it's a character that, the character outside of comicdom did not exactly have high name recognition before this movie came out.
No. I would be able to name... I could name all of the other Marvel characters that you talked about of movies I haven't seen before I could name this one. But this became a thing. This became something that I couldn't miss, and I needed to see in the theater. And the ecosystem just pressed that.
Yeah. absolutely.
And then, of course, what is important is the movie was good enough that once you succumbed to that, you left happy that you had done it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
It's pretty great. And I think one of the things, it's great on a couple of different levels. One, I will say that as someone who has watched all of the Marvel movies, I believe the Marvel movies, by and large, average at pretty good. I'd say the average is A minus. Even the ones that I think are the least of the whole list are still watchable. There's not any of them that I don't like. Some are great, and this is one of the great ones, in my opinion. But I mean, I think it has that pedigree going into it from the beginning. But then the other thing that it does that I think is important is it takes this idea, this traditional idea of the geeky, nerdy comic book superhero movie, and it says, historically, these have not been super diverse. And it's not that we want to say, let's be politically correct and be diverse just for the hell of it, but because expanding the horizons of what a superhero movie can be produces good stories that we haven't seen before, and interesting new expansions of what the whole concept can be, and bringing in an audience that otherwise wouldn't have been interested. It does all of those things, and it produces a better outcome as a result.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. Like, it's not just like, oh, here's a movie with a black superhero. Like, it leans so far into the culture and pride and all of that. I mean, it's just, it amplifies all that stuff. I mean, it's just, it does such a good job with that, but it doesn't alienate anybody. Like, you know, you don't go into it and say, oh.
I'm only hesitating just because there are people who are just have inherently set themselves up as opposed to anything that reeks of diversity. So I'm just there are those people. So I just think it's where, you know, we don't want to pretend that there aren't. I'm not that you were. I'm just saying.
Those people should watch this movie and just enjoy it, because it does a good job. It tributes everything it needs to for the culture it's trying to represent without overbeating it for people who don't want to see that overbeating. It's a very, very good movie that hits incredible notes on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just fun. Outside, you take all, and you just take that all out of it. It's just a fun movie.
Definitely.
The performances are great. The fights are great. Like, it's just fun.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that the balances that it strikes very well, and obviously, you know, neither of us are of African descent, obviously. So, you know, we can't speak as though we have that perspective, but it does do something really interesting where the movie is starting from this idea of, that does come from the comics, of Wakanda as this fictional country that asks the science fictional question, what if there was an African nation that had never been subjected to, you know, colonization from outside nations? What if it was a society, a civilization that had been allowed to grow and thrive and excel completely on its own merits? What would that look like? And to be able to tell that story, but then also to tie that to the issues faced by people of an underclass in, you know, the United States. People left behind, people, you know, not able to achieve everything that they think they deserve, and that sort of thing of looking at both an oppressed class in one place and having that be the United States, and yet also this other height, and being able to tell both of those stories and have the two perspectives meaningfully interact to drive the conflict in the movie.
Yep.
I think it's really interesting. And it certainly makes Killmonger one of the most memorable villains in the Marvel's movies, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Is Aquaman a Marvel movie?
No.
Okay.
Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash, Green Lantern are all DC.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to talk any further on it. I was just, when you brought up the villain, I was going to compare him to the villain in the DC.
Yeah, I mean, you can still compare them. They were both superhero movies.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think Killmonger is in sort of the, like, surface level story.
Mm-hmm.
He is, like, the most similar to the Aquaman villain. Mm-hmm. Like, I know, like, their actual, like, journeys are very different in that, like, you sort of flip the oppressed versus the... Mm-hmm. But where they sit versus their hero and everything is very similar, and you never identify really with the Aquaman villain. Mm-hmm. You can really feel like where Killmonger's coming from. And while you're not rooting for him,
well,
you're also not opposed to, like, where
in a way. Yeah, I mean, I think we, the audience, are put in a similar position to T'Challa in the movie, you know, our hero, because the issue ultimately is we don't even disagree with what has made Killmonger so angry. He has a point. But what he means to do about it can't be allowed to happen.
Right.
And you wish you could persuade him to choose some other path to deal with his righteous anger about how he was treated and how others have been treated. And that's, you know, that is a great story. You know, and it really... and I think it's more interesting than it might have been to just have Wakanda versus the United States or something like that.
Which is essentially what Aquaman became. It was Atlantis versus the world. You know? And but I mean, I'm being like, I'm not. I personally felt that there were very similar.
There's definitely parallels.
Yeah, themes to them, and that's, I think, why Black Panther is on this list, whereas Aquaman, while a thoroughly enjoyable movie, won't be on this list next year.
No. I liked Aquaman. It's pretty silly in a lot of parts.
But it's missing some of these subtleties in that.
Yeah, it's not on the same level, for sure.
Right, it doesn't draw this, like, you know, Wakanda versus the USA. It doesn't draw this, like, you know, oh, this spurned relative that, you know, I mean, that all the kind of same pieces are there, but it's the storytelling is so tight, and there are so many complexities that you watch it. Like you said, you watch and you're like, I also don't want, you know, it takes all of the battles and everything for you to be like, okay, yes, I guess he needs to defeat Killmonger. Where, like, the rest of the movie, you're rooting for him to convince him to not do what he's planning on doing.
It's basically
he's wrong.
He's determined to perpetuate the cycle of vengeance and violence. And
right. But you're sitting there as an audience member, and you're not like, oh, you need to show him how wrong he is. You're just like, oh, you need to show him there's a different way to do this. But he's definitely right.
You want to stop him from doing what he's doing, and you wish you could have him sit down and have that persuasive conversation instead of having to fight him. But ultimately, just, you know, he can't. Finds that the only way to stop him is to stop him. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing too that I think is really remarkable about this movie is the cast has got a lot of secondary characters that are very memorable. We have so many different secondary characters in this movie that are all given their time to shine. They're given interesting things to do. We get who they are as characters. It's just we've got. I'm pulling up the list of the character names just so that I make sure I'm not going to mispronounce them. But we have. Here we go. So we've got T'Challa himself, who is Black Panther. He's our lead. We've got Michael B. Jordan playing Eric Killmonger, two obvious leads. But then we've got Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia, Danai Gurira as Okoye, who was the the bald one with the tattoos on her head, yep. And we've got Daniel Kaluuya from who is from Get Out as W'Kabi. We've got Letitia Wright as Shuri. We've got Winston Duke as M'Baku, and then of course we also have Angela Bassett and Forrest Whitaker, and that's just the Wakandan characters, right? And then of course we have we also have Martin Freeman in there, and Andy Serkis as Ulysses Klaue. And I just mean, like, this is a big cast, and yet all of those characters are given interesting things to do, and we remember who they are and what they did in the movie for the most part, right? I mean, it's like that's something.
No, I think that that's also important. Is outside of just like everything that has already been talked about with it, like the female characters have strong agency in this movie, mm-hmm. and that is part of what ticked into why this became a cultural moment. It wasn't just the black superhero movie. Mm-hmm. It was, here is a movie that did all of these things for all of these diverse groups of people that make up America, that mm-hmm. go to movies, and gave them all some agency in a great story.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's I think the thing that I saw a lot when this movie came out, and I've seen some again now that Into the Spider-Verse has come out, is people talking about how they never really had the experience before of going to a superhero movie and seeing someone that looked like them.
Yes.
And that's something that, as white people, we could take for granted. To some extent, right? But it's to have that be such a meaningful experience for people, even if that's obviously not our direct perspective. I am very glad for those people to have been able to have that experience.
Yes.
So lots of great stuff in this story, like the action's great. There's great set pieces of, the fighting in the casino, and then the car chase, and all of the fun little technology about like Shuri driving the remote control car from her sandbox thing back in Wakanda, and the surprisingly intimate final battle at the end too, where not just between Killmonger and T'Challa, but even the fighting outside is a relatively small area where that's all happening, right?
Right, and a lot of like people who have affinities with each other mm-hmm. and are battling because of very small divisions over something,
right.
and being just very difficult, like emotionally, like how they're all like, how it wound up to where it was,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great stuff for sure. So we briefly talk about what the various nominations. It obviously has Best Picture nomination, as we've discussed.
I'll be right back.
Okay. The other nominations that Black Panther has are, it has Best Original Score, Best Original Song, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design, Uh, best sound mixing, best sound editing, not best visual effects. Yeah, so that's it. So sound editing, sound mixing, costume design, production design, and score and song, and then of course best picture. And I think I don't think there's any of those that that are not like worthy. Production design and costume design in particular are very notable because creating this whole fictional nation of Wakanda and having all of these different manners of dress that are pulling from different African traditions to show that even within Wakanda, it's not a monolithic culture. That they have these different individual cultural regions within Wakanda, and just the cool look of all of those costumes and the set pieces, like the big waterfall arena thing that they do, which seems a little implausible how everybody gets to those viewing positions, but like who cares really, because it looks so cool. And you know, just, you know, the visual look of you know, like the sandbox thing, making the costume look so cool. It's production design and costumes, it really excels at those for sure.
Very good at that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I didn't especially remember the song. I think the song probably, again, like with the previous one you mentioned, was an end credits song.
Yeah, so, well, I'm not even 100% positive on that because the movie came out with, like, an accompanying, like, it's not a tribute album, but, like, an album of songs about the movie that weren't actually in the movie. And I think this was on that album, but so I mean, assuming it had to be in the movie at some point to be able to be nominated.
I mean, it played a couple of songs in the credits, so it might have been one
right there. But my point is, there's this whole stream of, like, there was a music album that sort of was parallel to this that they kind of intersected, and that's where this song came from. So.
Yeah, so I have not re-listened to this song, but I feel like all of the Marvel movies have had good scores, but again, this wasn't, you know, it's been a while since I saw it, so I haven't rewatched it since the nominations came out, so I don't remember the music in particular, but, you know, I don't remember disliking it. But yeah, so I think, though, it's overall the Best Picture nomination is the big one here, right? That's the historic thing of, like, the first superhero movie to get a Best Picture nomination. And back when, you know, we talked a little bit about this last time, where the idea that there might have been another category of Best Popular Movie, and everyone immediately said, oh, that's the one you want to create just so you don't have to give Black Panther a Best Picture nomination? And everyone was like, oh, well,
no, I mean,
okay,
no,
called our bluff, so that's not what we meant to do. We weren't ever going to do that.
That's the thing. And, Black Panther's a true Best Picture.
Yeah.
It never would have been the popular Best Picture.
Yeah. In fact, we would have made sure it didn't get the Best Popular Picture. Anyway, obviously that didn't happen anyway. So, but it's really nice to see it as Best Picture here. And honestly, I would not be upset if it won.
Oh, I would. I'd be happy if it won. I think it would be deserving. I like other movies on this list. I think that it has the merits of any of them to win this.
Yeah,
I don't think it will.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I think the Academy probably there's portions of the Academy that probably feel like they have done their duty by noticing that Black Panther was a good movie and giving it the nomination, and now they're going to pick something else.
Yeah.
So I agree, but I would definitely, you know, I liked it enough. I would definitely be happy if it did win. Anything else you want to cover about Black Panther, or?
Nope.
All right. So the next Best Picture nominee that we've both seen is Roma, which is the Alfonso Cuarón movie in the Spanish language. Mexican films nominated as Best Foreign Language Film as well. Streaming on Netflix. I want to briefly, last time, realize that I was conflating in my head Alfonso Cuarón and Pedro Almodovar when I was saying I got a little confused over which movies were his, is because I was conflating those two guys. So that's
when we started arguing, and I was right, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I disagreed with you as much as I got confused and you were not confused. So
fair. we can paint it that way. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
I know
but yes, that is absolutely what was happening in my brain. Is I got a little bit mixed up of which ones were from which guy. But in any event, this one is by Alfonso Cuarón, and it's pretty good.
It is good. And for me, it's good in the way that, you know, that there's these movies that show up on these things where it's like, you watch it once, you're glad you've seen it and experienced it. You're not going to watch it again. And
yeah.
And sometimes that, I mean that in a negative way. And this one, I don't. It's more of a neutral way. I'm not going to engage in this experience again. But that's not because it was sad or a bad movie. It just, the story that it told was meant to be ingested by me once, and I'm fine with that. And so I'm not criticizing it. I'm just sort of, that is a very definite feeling that I left with this. It's like, yeah, I'll definitely not watch that again. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I feel like I'm, you know, bursting at the gates to watch it a second time, but I didn't have like any sort of a definitive feeling like that. But
I also, I mean, I have to consider, like, I do have like there are times, like, some things I have to think about like that, because my wife and I don't always watch movies together, and so there are times when I I guess I have to be more active in thinking about that. Like, if I watch something without her,
yeah, is that a movie you would want to watch again with her?
Right. Do I want to? And so there's like a couple of tiers. Do I recommend this movie to her, but I don't want to watch it again? Do I recommend this movie to her and I watch it with her again and I enjoy it a second time? Or do I just leave it off the list and I just enjoy that I've watched it? Or did this suck and I'm telling her not to watch it because it sucked?
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, I just have that different, like, there's just that different process I go through, and I guess that's probably where this came in.
Sure. Well, you know, it's funny when you said a couple of tiers, because obviously you meant TIERS, right? Tiers, yes, as in layers, right? Yep. But when you said it, I picked it up from context, but when you started the sentence, my brain immediately went to the places in the movie where I cried. So.
like.
Because the movie does, like, you were saying, it's not because it's sad. It's definitely sad in several places.
It is, but I guess my benchmark for the movie for movies that are sad, in that I am glad I watched them and don't like watching them again, is Mystic River.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that it's not the only one, but that's sort of like sort of my cultural benchmark.
Yeah.
Like, you get it? Like,
yeah, I do. You know, I don't put this movie and that movie in the same box in my head.
No. I'm not putting them in the same box. That's why I'm saying, when I say it's not sad, I'm moving it. It to the one side. If my benchmark is Mystic River, and I'm saying, oh, this movie, it's not like it's so sad I'm not going to watch it again. I've moved it to that delta.
Like, Mystic River is one of those movies that's kind of like punishing. Like, there's nothing about it feels good.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a movie I don't like watching. Don't ever like watching. Like, I have, and ever since I made the proclamation I would never watch it again, I have, but only in the sense that you're saying, in like of this sort of weird, like I kind of feel like punishing myself with that feeling. Like,
well, like you kind of want to interrogate that reaction. I think is like, was it really as powerful? You know,
and and it's always that bad, and it always is. And
yeah.
So that's what I was saying when I said it wasn't sad. I'm working off of that delta.
Sure. Well, so if anyone is not familiar with it at all, it basically is telling a story of a year in the life, approximately, of a young woman named Cleo who works as a maid, nanny, sort of a slightly undefined character of working for a well-off family in Mexico. And so some of the things that happen during this year are, like the marriage of the parents of this family goes through some trouble, and then there's also some civil unrest going on, and she has some personal challenges of her own. I'm being kind of coy about spoilers, even though we've previously talked about being willing to do spoilers, but I don't know that I necessarily feel like we need to dive into the spoilers.
No, I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, unless you were like we're essentially writing a paper on the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think the spoilers have that much to do with it. It's more of the sort of the ebb and flow of this movie.
Right. It is the pace is very measured. It's not a fast moving movie, and I think that's because it really is telling kind of this slice of life story where there are some big events that happen, where there's big set pieces and dramatic things happening, even though it's just a slice of life story. But ultimately it's paced like this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens, because that's the order they happen in for this young woman. And so it's kind of got a very deliberate pace in that way. But I think it does a number of things that are really interesting beyond just the storytelling. So let's briefly go through the nominations it got, because it tied with The Favorite for most total nominations at 10. So it was nominated for Best Picture. And I'm sorry, I changed my window size and now
popped it. There you
go. So it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Alfonso Cuarón, Best Actress for Yalitza Aparicio. It's small on my screen right now. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, who played Cleo, the lead. It was also nominated for Best Supporting Actress for Marina de Tavira, who was the mother in the family that Cleo works for. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, written by Alfonso Cuarón. It was Best Foreign Language Film from Mexico. Best Production Design, Best Cinematography, Best Sound Mixing, Best Sound Editing, and that was it. But I think sound mixing and sound editing, I reflected, the last time when we talked about it briefly, that, I watched it on a hotel room TV off TV speakers, so it was probably not the best way to experience the sound production design on this movie.
Yeah, and it's not really, it's untraditional or non-traditional in the way that you would think of those kind of movies. Because there's no big bang like this and that. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of the revolution scene and all that, but the majority of it is not done that way. I think these are more nods to it's just the movie's general technical capability, which I think is, not something you should see a movie for. Because you should go to a movie because you also want to be.
Yeah, I mean,
but
they support the overall experience.
Right. like you don't want to see a terrible movie that just has an incredible technical capability. But this is telling a powerful story, but it has a technical capability that has an incredible depth.
Yeah.
And
well,
I think it does, because of the pacing of the movie. I mean, the movie's sort of slow paced, slow dialogue. I think a lot of the cinematography, the sound editing, the sound mixing, the editing, all of these other pieces are what allowed someone who wasn't even an actress to become one of the Best Actress nominations, because the movie is taking her down this thing. I mean, she's doing a good job, but the rest of the technical capability is what's supporting what's putting her in that position.
Yeah, I definitely I don't think you're trying to suggest that any of those things take away from her performance itself.
No, but they enhance it.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, that all of these different pieces come together to collectively support and uplift the whole experience of the movie. And her performance is one of those things, but all of these other pieces of the movie are carrying their own weight as well.
Right. And if you extract, but I also feel like they're so symbiotic, and that if you extract any of them, it maybe the whole Tower of Dominoes falls down.
Yeah.
Or House of Cards. So not that she can't deliver a good performance on her own, but if you take all of that other technical capability out of that, is she still seen as the best actress? I don't think so. I feel like how you feel about how that moment is happening, because of not only how she's delivering it, but how the sound and the editing and the cinematography and the layering of the whole scene is impacting you, is what elevates her to where she gets the nomination. So, but to my point, I don't want to detract from her. I also think that's why they're nodding to sound editing and sound mixing in a movie that doesn't necessarily really highlight all of that. They're looking at it and they're saying, wow, the technical capabilities across the whole spectrum, the sum of all the parts is so greater than any of these individuals.
Yeah.
And that is what made this a Best Picture.
Well, so I
think
anything
on its own doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll talk more about the acting in just a moment, but when we're looking at production design and cinematography here, there's some really remarkable stuff being done in the cinematography in this movie, and let's even just discuss the opening shot, which starts with just a pattern of tile, which we discover is a floor, but you can't even tell that from the shot because it's just a close-up of this tile. And then as you start hearing some water splashing noises and some sweeping type noises, and then every so often there's a tiny little wave of water that cascades over the tile that we can see. And this it gradually increases and increases until the water has started to accumulate enough that when it's calm, we can see in the reflection of the water that, once we see the water on it, we know it's a floor. But then you can see in the reflection the upward view of this tiny little sort of alley driveway of this house that shows both the main entrance, but then also the little rickety stairs that goes up to Cleo's apartment, and then a plane flying overhead, and it just starts to slowly set the scene just visually and experientially, as we discover that what she's doing is she's cleaning up dog poop off of this driveway.
Right, and which has become such a phenomenal, I forget what you call it when you have that benchmark that exists through your whole story.
Motif?
I don't think that's I know what motif. It's almost it's almost like the resetting of the screen. You're off on doing one thing, and then you're oh, and you bring it back and center, like the dog poop in the
touchstone.
Yes, it's like a touchstone that like keeps taking you through like all of the movie, no matter whichever narrative we're down. We always come back to the dog keeps pooping in the hallway.
Well, right, like it's this ongoing thing that we realize where the story is telling this interesting story, which I don't know if you looked this up, but apparently the movie is not strictly autobiographical, but it is completely based on autobiographical experiences from Alfonso Cuarón. So, like, Cleo is not his nanny specifically. It's like, it's not explicit, but she is based on his nanny, and the things that happen in this movie are things that he remembers happening.
Right, so I'd heard that. So is he essentially the young child?
I think that, so my understanding would be that that is the closest parallel, but that it is explicitly not a one-for-one thing.
That I knew, but I guess I never really understood.
It's a fictionalized version of things that happened to him and to his nanny maid character, who the film is dedicated to, the real person. And so, but what's interesting in this story is it definitely tells in a pretty effective way a story about how close to these families, someone who works in that position can get, caring for the children, live in, you really become kind of part of the family, but at the end of the day, it's still always her job to clean up the dog poop.
Yep.
So that's, as that touchstone example, it is a good example of that, of just this idea that she really does become part of the family, but she is also the part that has to do all the dirty work because that is what's expected.
Right, and there's even parts where like something gets really heated with the family, and if there's too much dog poop, like the mother turns to her and is like, "Why is there all this dog poop?" When it's really, she's like, "Why is all this nastiness happening with my husband?"
Right.
But it's redirected into that.
So she has to do both the manual and the emotional labor sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's just that opening shot is one example of the cinematography. There's another, this is a minor spoiler, but there's another shot that's really kind of breathtaking in the riots sequence, where we have just so our, Cleo and the grandmother of the family are together in this department store. They're trying to buy a crib, is what they're in town for. And this is when the riots break out outside. And what we see is them watching as someone is running inside, into the department store, being chased by people who he tries to hide, and these people chasing him basically pull him out of this cabinet he's trying to hide in and shoot him. To the horror of everybody who's just a shopper in this store. But as we watch this playing out in the background, we kind of slowly start to pan over and we realize Cleo is not looking at that. We kind of imagined that this shot was sort of like a POV, like it is what Cleo would be watching if she's standing there, but when we start to pan over, we realize that's not what she's looking at. She's looking at something else, and she's scared. Why? Keep panning, see that someone's pointing a gun right at her. Keep panning. It's the father of her baby, who apparently has been part of this, thug squad that's been trained to put down the uprising.
Right.
And he is, shaking because he didn't expect her to be there. She didn't expect him to be there. Now there's a gun, and it's just this amazing shot. There's like 3 different surprises as that shot progresses.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's some really remarkable stuff in the cinematography in this movie, for sure. And it is a black and white movie, if anyone was not clear on that. There was apparently a weird Twitter controversy where someone put posted a screenshot where the artifacting of converting the image to a JPEG made it look like there was some weird colorization in it. And then people got mad, like, where did you get a colorized version? And it was this whole little mini controversy because, because there really wasn't ever a colorized version. So it was nothing. But I don't know. I just remember hearing about that. But then...
No, but that's hilarious.
Yeah. So we talked about, production design and cinematography. We talked about the sound a little bit. We talked a little bit about the performance, but I think in particular we have, Yalitza Aparicio, which, as we discussed, not an actor before this. She was like a teacher, I think. And yet she's putting in a heartbreaking performance here where there's ups and downs and awkward in-betweens, and she plays everything really kind of understated, which you could imagine an inexperienced actress being more over the top. But, whether it's her natural talents or Alfonso Cuarón's directing or all of the other things combining, and I'm sure it's all of the things combining, but it creates this really powerful, understated performance. Because although she's going through all of these things, she is in a position a lot of the time where she is really not free to fully express everything she's feeling.
Yes, and so obviously they're like, the whole movie like embodies that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the scene that delivered the most impactful performance from her, from Cuarón, from like just the whole like setup of it, mm-hmm. was when the kids got too far out in the water.
Oh my gosh, that sequence is terrifying.
Right, but it's so understated, and you're like you're so uncomfortable, mm-hmm. and she can't swim, they can't swim, everybody's out in the water. It's supposed to be this celebratory weekend, mm-hmm. but it's not really that celebratory because they have left for the weekend so that the father can retrieve his things and leave the children, and there's just like so many emotions going on, mm-hmm. and it's so it's just this static shot of her like walking out in the water, like trying to find them, and then there's these like almost like horror movie type stuff of them, sort of popping up in the waves, and it's like you don't know if he's going to get them or not get them. But that is the movie's tone, like amplified, but also in a nutshell, if that makes sense.
Well, it's something that I think is instantly recognizable to anyone who's ever been, in charge of taking care of kids, in the sense that sometimes things happen where, like, okay, you don't want to immediately panic because everything might be fine, but you're not sure it's fine yet. And you need to make sure it's going to be fine, and there's that period where you're not sure yet if it's going to be fine or not, and it might be really bad, and you don't know. And like there's a bit earlier on too where one of the kids runs ahead when they're all going to the movies or something, runs ahead, and he kind of gets out of sight of Cleo, and she's trying to hurry back and forth, and wait, he's not there. I thought that's where he was going. I have to go back. And where is he? Has he lost? What's going on? And that sort of tension, and that feeling of you don't want to panic if there isn't really appropriate panic, but the tension starts to build, and you start realizing, oh God, now you need to not panic because you actually need to do something, because it's really bad. It is really bad. And, one of my favorite kinds of scene in any movie, and I've always been a sucker for this kind of scene, is the slow burn realizing that things are much worse than you thought. And the archetypal example that I always think of with this is actually from The Abyss, where they're in the sub and they've just fought off the crazy Marine, and they're stopped, but they think they're safe for the moment. There's just a little leak, but we just have to fix it. Oh, wait. It's kind of in a hard to reach spot. Oh, wait, we don't have the tools. Oh, wait, you don't have your suit. Oh, this is really bad. And just kind of that slow building realization. And the scene that you're talking about is another perfect example of that, of everything's fine until it kind of slowly turns into not fine at all.
Yeah, to like, oh, yeah, it's fine. I'm just going to get them. I'm just going to get them out of the water. To, oh my God, I can't find them. Oh my God, I'm starting to get into a level where I can't swim. But I'm going to keep marching through because these kids are my responsibility. But I don't, oh, there's one of them. But wait, there's a second kid. I need the other kid. I mean,
oh God, that scene is intense.
It's so intense, and
yet understated still.
Right, and that's why when you said that, like the understated performance versus all this, and that's why, and to also my point of like all of the technical capabilities, that's what makes a scene like that work, because no one is overperforming.
Yeah, no close-ups in that sequence.
There's no close-ups, there's no flash cuts, there's no music pumping away like this is intense. It's just, you're just watching it as a spectator. And all of the capabilities of the movie have drawn you into this where it's like, this is so intense.
Right. And then the catharsis that comes at the end of that is this huge catharsis, and yet...
But different than we expected.
Right, different than we expected, and also she's still their maid. She still has to, when they get home, it's still her job to clean up the dog poop.
Right.
So... I think this movie is really great. I was blown away. We didn't really talk much yet about Marina de Tavira, who plays the mother. Also great. I mean, I think it's a much less flashy role, but she's also doing great stuff. It's her. She has a more thankless role in this movie of being the woman who's kind of at her wit's end because her marriage is falling apart and she doesn't really know how best to handle it, and sometimes takes it out on Cleo, but is other times very grateful and appreciative of Cleo, and kind of wavers between those two things because she really is probably feeling both of those things at once.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else to say about Roma?
Nope.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one that we've both seen then, Incredibles 2. I don't think the discussion for this will be as long as the one for Roma, probably.
I mean, it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of my my take on it too. Is the first Incredibles is like one of my favorite animated movies. The second one, I enjoyed it while I was watching it, and then the credits rolled and it was just gone. I didn't find it lingering in my thoughts in any way.
Yeah, it doesn't add anything to the... You know, we did all this talk about like how Marvel builds all these things. Like, this doesn't build off of like it's just the same characters doing some more fun stuff.
In some ways, it feels like a little bit of a step backwards for Bob. In some ways,
I didn't even actually realize that. Like, think about it directly for Bob. I thought about it just like in for all of them. I mean, other than like, I guess they took the idea of like, oh, we're going to raise the profile of his wife, you know, and like. That was sort of, I guess that was sort of the impetus for the movie.
Well, and I did.
And that was cool.
I liked that piece of it. I liked Elastigirl out doing her solo thing. I liked all of that stuff, and I didn't.
And her confliction with like being out there and being the face of the family and like having to like go back. Like that part was cool, but that was like
especially knowing that there was a little bit of not quite legal about it, you know, that like we believe in this and so we're willing to go out and she's willing to put herself out there for a cause she believes in, even though she knows technically not legal, and if she gets in trouble that could have disastrous consequences on her family. And you know, and so I really liked all of that actually. And the stuff with Bob at home taking care of the you know, the kids and the baby in particular, I mean, like that stuff was fun, but it was just kind of a slapstick cartoony way. There didn't really it didn't. And honestly, it's one thing for him to discover it's harder being the stay-at-home parent than he thought. That's fine. It's a standard trope that's been in lots of things. But it's nothing wrong with that. I did not like the bit about him being jealous of Elastigirl, getting to be the one going out and doing the hero stuff. Like, I get it, but I didn't like it.
So I was more okay with that, but it doesn't, like, none of it elevates the movie for me. I mean, I'm okay with that being a part of it. Like, oh, the big, you know, I'm the superhero, and I'm so big, and, you know, and I have this family of superheroes, and then all of a sudden, like, his wife is overshadowing him. Like, yeah, okay, I kind of get they acknowledge that there's a jealousy there, because that would be an actual thing that would happen.
Yeah, no, and so, like that's why I'm saying, like, I believe it, but I didn't like it. Like, I get that it's an understandable reaction for the character to have, but I didn't enjoy being told that story.
Yeah, so we differ on that, because I did like that part of it.
Fair. I didn't hate it. It was just not the part that I liked.
Right, but overall, again, I liked everything this story told. It just wasn't, just didn't move.
Yeah,
it's an airplane movie.
Yeah, you know? It felt very forgettable compared to the first one.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer. I was hoping for better, but especially given that there was a whole bunch of stuff about how it went so long before getting a sequel, because supposedly they were waiting for the script to be just right, and I don't think they quite got it there.
No, I have to feel like they think that elevating Elastigirl and humbling Bob was what got it right.
Yeah.
But while those things were okay, the rest, like all the other parts that came around that, like weren't all that. It just wasn't that good, you know.
Right, and like sitting here right now, I can't even, like, so I guess I remember that Violet's arc was she was basically bummed that her new boyfriend got his memory erased. But that was pretty much it, right?
That's Violet's arc, yep.
What was Dash's whole plot? Like, I don't even remember.
He had none. And then the other baby turned out, like, Baby Jack apparently, like, could just, like, do a whole bunch of shit.
Yeah, like, he was a cartoon baby that did a lot of things that made it hard for Bob to take care of him. That's his story.
Right, and then he, like, the whole point, and then he took her to the suit designer, and she was...
Edna Mode remains amazing.
So impressed with how all the shit he could do, but it was hard to, like, design a suit for him because he does a lot of shit.
Well, like, that
was basically where it all, like, landed.
Edna Mode remained my favorite part of both movies, though. So I like her so much. Anyway, though, yeah, I mean, like, there was nothing about the movie that I hated or even really disliked, but it was just I watched it and then I was like, and then I didn't really think about it anymore until this list came out.
Yep. I mean, I was the same way.
Yep.
There was not a point in the movie where I disliked that I was watching it, but it was not memorable after.
Yeah. So. I think that comparatively, because I already mentioned earlier that Ralph Breaks the Internet I found kind of disappointing, I think Ralph Breaks the Internet is more uneven by comparison. I think the highs were higher, but the lows were lower as well. Compared to Incredibles 2. But, so let's go ahead and move on to Isle of Dogs, which is a Wes Anderson stop motion, return to stop motion animation since doing Fantastic Mr. Fox a few years ago. Was that 2014, something like that? That's a wild guess, but I think it's probably pretty close. I had some really mixed feelings about this movie because I feel like a lot of it I really, really loved, but why did it have to be in Japan?
Because they're cat fans.
Are they?
In the movie, they are.
In the movie, they are. But my point is that this movie caught some flack, and for basically being like it's kind of it's set in Japan, but makes Japan mostly not look very good. Mostly so that it can appropriate various tropes from like samurai movies and everything without really analyzing any of that, and it's just used for aesthetics.
Yeah, you're right. That's why the movie's set in Japan.
Yeah.
So they could use the samurai aesthetics.
Yeah, so, and I think that is a fair criticism of this movie, and it bothered me.
Yeah, and until you just pointed it out, like unfortunately, that didn't register with me.
Yeah. So. Well, apparently it didn't register with Wes Anderson either until, or either that, or if people told him that and he didn't care or something. I don't know, but I think he's even said in interviews that he had previously wanted to make a movie set in Japan, and he had also wanted to make this movie about dogs, and so he kind of just combined the two. Which, again, makes it like, oh, so there was really no thought at all into having it actually be meaningful in any way for it to be set in Japan. Like, it could have been a completely fictional country. You know, I think that there is something interesting done with just the idea that the humans don't speak the same language as the dogs do. Like, I think that's interesting, but it could have been just a made-up language. It didn't have to be Japanese.
Yeah. No, I feel guilty for not having recognized that.
Oh, well, I don't think there's any need for that necessarily, but unfortunate, well, I don't know if it's unfortunate. Hearing some of the discourse about this was why I ended up not seeing the movie right away. Just because I had been excited for it, and then I heard some of the people criticizing this. I don't know that I necessarily would have had it leap out at me either, except that I heard people talking about it before I saw the movie.
You just hang out with a lot of angry people.
Well, I hang out with a lot of people who talk about movies a lot. So,
fair.
Yeah, so, I mean, they talk good things about movies that they like, too. And again, I think the thing with this movie is that it's frustrating because while that piece of it is, I think, a valid criticism, I also think there's no malice in it. No. It's an appreciation of the aesthetic. It just doesn't really give it as much as consideration as it probably should have. But it's also well-meaning. I mean, he uses those aesthetics because he likes them, which is appropriation, but it's at least, it's not malicious. But other pieces of it, I love so much. Because I'm a big Wes Anderson fan in general. And so it's all the more just frustrating that it feels like if he had just had this movie set in some fictional made-up country, instead of having it be Japan, almost everything else could have been exactly the same, and I would have loved it so much more. I love lots of things about it. But, yeah, it's also got that one that element that's hard to completely get away from.
Which you've got to imagine for him, he never realized. Like he probably thought it was like transitional.
Yeah.
Like people who love Japan and love his movies would see this as a great unification of that.
Maybe. I mean, I wonder though, because it's hard to know, because it's not the first time he's received criticisms similar to this, because Darjeeling Limited had some of the same criticisms about India basically just being a tourist location for white people in that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's not as bad. It's not like there's still no malice in it, but it's just not as sensitive as maybe it could have been. And so I wonder here if he just really had no idea. It's probably a case where if he really had no idea and nobody told him, it's probably because he didn't ask anyone. Or didn't ask the right people. But that's hard to know. I mean, I don't know. I can't see into his brain. Maybe he thought that it was all loving homage and that, you know, that was his intent, and that any other interpretation could be a seen as perhaps a failure of execution, but not intent. You know, but at the same time, it's like the country of Japan does not come out of this movie looking great in the story. You know, like, it's a happy ending at the end. We like our kid, Hiro, but the country itself is not made to look great.
I mean, it's not a true story.
That's true. It's true. I know. I'm just saying, again, it's like...
And didn't actually make Isle of Dogs.
I know.
We don't criticize Los Angeles for the...
It's not a true story. It didn't really happen, but Japan is a real country that he chose to tell this fictional story in.
Yes. So is LA, and so is New York, and Snake Plissken goes into those places in, you know, in dystopias that are not real. Like,
I mean, I don't want to overstate this. This doesn't make it a terrible movie. It makes it a movie that has a significant aspect that I wish had been thought through more or approached differently.
I feel like this is a very 2019 problem, though. Like,
well, yeah, for sure. But it's also a movie that we're talking about on a list of 2019 Oscar movies.
Correct. But, I mean, and I kind of feel like I've hit on this, like, Escape from New York. That paints a very terrible picture of New York.
Yeah.
It's not real. It's not real.
But it's also told by Americans about an American city.
Okay. Fair.
Again, I don't want to overstate this, and we're talking about this to the exclusion so far of things that I think really work and are great about it. But I just felt like that was a piece of the conversation that was worth having.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. I didn't see that. Maybe that's on me, but...
Well, I'm certainly not trying to put anything on you for either seeing it or not seeing it. I mean, I heard this conversation about the movie before I saw it, so I don't know whether I would have thought about this otherwise. But having it pointed out to me, it's like, oh, yeah, I can see that.
For me, this is the first time it's all been pointed out to me, and it's not like I don't see what you're talking about, but it's like I didn't realize, and that also makes me feel uncomfortable. Like,
yeah,
wow, how did I not see that? Like,
yeah, I certainly didn't mean to put you on the spot or anything like that. I mean, I think this movie is a perfect example, I think, of something that is, I think, a good, I was going to say life skill, but that's maybe not the right thing. It's a good way to approach media, which is the idea of, some people call it like the problematic fave, which is to say, you can have a piece of media that you know has some issue with it and still love it, but you can love it without having to ignore that it has issues.
right.
And that's useful because there are very few pieces of media that have no issues at all in them. So I think that it's fair to love the things that are lovable in this movie. Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. And there are lots of things that I loved about it. But it does have some issues. I loved, first of all, I mean, I'm a dog fan. I love dogs. And so it's a story about dogs and loving dogs, and dogs are cute, and I like dogs, and they get to be voiced by Bill Murray and Jeff Goldblum and
Well,
Wes Anderson's whole thing.
And the stop motion dogs are so good that my actual dog reacted to them.
Aww.
And they're stop motion like cartoon like dogs. Like they're not dogs. And the whole movie. Yeah. So that's a testament to how good those were.
Well, yeah, and the style is so unique. I mean, it's similar in some ways to the Fantastic Mr. Fox movie, but like there's no one else. Oh, there's your puppy. Yeah, but so there's no other movies that look like this right now. Like even the other movies that still do stop animation, no one's doing it like this, right? They look like nothing else. Fantastic Mr. Fox and this one are similar to each other, but there are no other movies similar to them. So that's great, and I think that it goes very, very well with the sort of deadpan, staring at the camera sort of humor style that Wes Anderson is great at. That I think that they blend well, and I'm not at all surprised that he is a fan of the genre, and I'm glad that he came back to it because it's fun and unique, and it's telling this interesting story about, like at the heart of it, there's the very superficial but powerful idea of the kid who wants his dog. He loves his dog, and he wants to find his dog and save him, and that's really something. And then we add in all of the silliness of the dogs kind of acting like people, both Chief and Spots and their sort of exchanges of responsibility on that, and the whole idea of Spots finding himself in sort of a very mature, grown-up sort of situation of feeling very powerfully loyalty. You've made a commitment to this kid, but now you have other responsibilities too because you didn't think it was ever going to be a choice between them. But now you're in that tough situation, and then in the meantime, you've got the Greek chorus of these other dogs kind of following along and keep talking, like the Jeff Goldblum dog always is like, hey, did you hear the rumor about this? And giving some piece of exposition, and eventually they just say, it's like, where do you hear all these rumors? I don't know, I listen. And great stuff. And the brief moment where they're all riding this little garbage chute cart, and then it just splits in two, and the kid and the Chief go off in one and the other dogs are in the other, and they're just like, wait, what just happened? We had this whole plan. We were going to... And then the other dogs briefly go into this little pit that makes it seem like they're going to be incinerated, crushed, and pulped or whatever. Thankfully, they are not. But just the black humor of thinking for a moment, even that's what was going to happen. There's some powerful stuff in this, and it's also some very funny stuff. I really like the story.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. That's why. I mean, I get why you kind of came out hard against it, but that was.
Well, yeah, I maybe shouldn't have started there. I think because I don't want that to necessarily be the dominant piece of the discussion necessarily. I think it's worth talking about, but that doesn't make the movie not worth seeing, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's different than how you came out with it, but yeah.
I didn't mean for it to be conveyed the other way. It was more a matter of, I guess, just because I started there, and then we kind of had the conversation about where that was coming from and what it meant, and I think it ended up kind of becoming a bigger piece of the discussion than it would have if I had finished with it, of saying, here's this story that we love all these things about it, but let's also talk about this one aspect of it. how to balance that, I don't know. Maybe we could have done it in a different order or something like that. I mean, my end result is I think that those are some fair criticisms of the movie. That I think that in hindsight, he maybe would have made some different choices. But overall, I think the movie is still very much heartwarming, worth watching. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I think you might have approached it in this discussion from the wrong direction if that's where you were going to conclude. Because,
all right,
at least I felt like you came at that movie like a negative perspective to start with, and then you ended on a very positive, which was sort of off.
Okay, from my perspective, I was approaching it from the idea of saying, this is part of the cultural conversation about this movie, so let's just get this sort of, we can have it on the table and not hanging over the discussion. If people are aware of this and we're ignoring it, then they may wonder. And so I was kind of saying, like, let's touch that and then move on, was my thinking. But obviously, like, I think, without wanting to put anything on you, I think that there can also still be a reaction of, like, if you're starting from a position of, I love this movie, any criticism of it can be sort of magnified. You know what I mean? Like, I was not intending it to come across that way. I was intending to say, there is some criticism that I think is valid, but there are also things that I love about the movie, as opposed to me trying to say, the movie is terrible and here's why. That's not ever what I was trying to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, and yeah, so it might be partly on me of like how I reacted to it, but I
did not mean to ambush you with that conversation.
Yeah, and that you're right. Like, ambushing is probably the right term, because I didn't know any of that existed, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, let's talk about all this. I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, I kind of like the movie.
Well, I did too.
You ultimately also like the movie.
Yeah, and so I think in hindsight, I wouldn't have sprung it on you if I, not realizing that you hadn't really even heard that part of the.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Any of those ideas about it. So, so I'll reiterate, my summary of it is that I think there are a lot of things to love about the movie. I enjoyed watching it. I think it's worth watching. It does have some things about it that I think there's valid criticism of. Different choices he might have made, but it doesn't ruin the movie. It makes it yet another of the infinite list of movies that have some issues.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yes. and so I really do apologize if any of that came across like I was ambushing or surprising or even really trying to come out hard against the movie. That's really not how I intended to convey it.
Yeah, no, and it didn't feel like you meant to ambush me. It felt like I got ambushed by something I didn't know existed.
Yeah. Well, and in the context of a live stream, too, that can feel all the more on the spot. I didn't mean to put you in that situation. All right.
So let's move on.
Let's move on. So let's maybe do one more for tonight, and then we'll...
that should get us pretty far.
It does. How about let's finish with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs?
Yeah. Whoa. Pretty long. Yes.
Yeah. So if anyone is not familiar at all with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, it is an anthology film by the Coen brothers that is on Netflix streaming. It has 6 pieces, I think. They're all Western themed. Some of them are sort of funnier. Some of them are darker, but all of them are, for the most part, I think, pretty good. Well, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I left ultimately like, yes, I like what they did here.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think that all of the segments were equally as good.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say they're all equally good.
But I feel like dramatically. Like some were dramatically like more interesting and better done and poorer than others.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, again, and some of this is personal reaction. I mean, I don't like want to purport that the other ones weren't interesting to people other than me. I feel like it came out the gate hard.
Yeah.
You know, obviously with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. And
got Tim Blake Nelson as the eponymous Buster Scruggs.
Yes, and it hits all the notes. Like, it's funny. There's action. It's clever, and there's the payoff at the end, and it's not all just positive.
Well, and it's got that classic Coen Brothers, you know, twist of twist is almost feels like the wrong word, slant perhaps, of Tim Blake Nelson being the classic white hat singing cowboy, except that he also kills a lot of people for really minimal offenses.
Yes, and the over topness to it, like it just opens so hard.
Yeah,
and then it comes in with the next one, which is pretty damn clever. Like with the James Franco as the thief who, you know, gets put up for a hanging, survives it.
Yeah.
Survives it for a while, has to like get somebody to like come and get him. And then goes into a town and he gets put up for another hanging. And the sort of the culmination joke when the guy next to him is crying, and he was like, "Oh, first time."
Yeah. Yeah.
But ultimately, he still gets hung.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's so clearly a short designed to be the setup to that punchline.
Right.
Yeah.
With a black, like dark, funny punchline.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one's funny. And then it starts to meander for me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I think.
And I get what they're doing. Like I don't look at it and say, "Oh, this is stupid." Like I'm like, "Oh, I see what you're trying to do," but it's just not resonating.
Yeah, I definitely will say that I liked parts of all of them, but like I liked the first two. I really liked the Tom Waits Prospector one, especially as you didn't like that one.
No.
Okay, it was kind of slow paced, but I don't know. I kind of just I liked it as kind of a palate cleanser and just the idea of, you know, the kind of honorable but crotchety character that he's playing, where like, you know, he even goes up like he's trying to get the bird's eggs from the nest and he sees the bird watching him and he decides well, he's not going to take all the eggs, but wait, he's going to take one. How high can birds count anyway? I just like the idea of like, he's not going to take all of this bird's babies, but he does want one egg. And you know, like I like that, and I kind of like that. And then there were lots of parts of the like the wagon train one where I liked it as it was going on, and then it kind of was such a downer ending to it that I was just like, oh well.
Yeah, that one and the performer guy.
Yeah, both of those were definitely just downer endings for sure.
Right, and they were interesting stories, but they were so sad. And so, like, you're hitting these weird tones of, like, you're kind of laughing at the negativeness of the first two. Like, the black, like, the whole point, I think, of them is that it's supposed to be 6 black comedies. And the first two are truly comedic. In the, you know, Buster Scruggs and the James Franco one.
Yeah, I started to agree. I'm not sure I agree actually that they're all supposed to be black comedies.
Okay.
I think
maybe I'm
the anthology does present itself with 2 black comedies back to back, which can convey that that was their intention. But I think ultimately, looking at the whole thing, I don't think they're all intended to be black comedy. Like
that makes a lot more sense. I guess then maybe I went into it thinking because there was a lot of blackness in all of them.
No, I mean, I think that's the movie does not. Yeah,
but I think that's a fault of the movie, though. If like
no, I agree. It presents itself as though it's going to be more black comedy.
Tone 1, Tone 2, and then all of a sudden, like Tone 3 is. I think that's the one where Liam Neeson drowns his friend, or not his friend.
Yeah, I know.
Argue whatever.
Like, yeah, you're right.
In your head, doesn't matter. Guy drowns his companion.
Yeah.
That's not the same tone as James Franco getting hung and Buster Scruggs getting killed by a faster gun. Like those aren't the same things.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, yeah, okay, but it's well told, so you're still good. And then you go to what you call the palate cleanser, but it's like, to me, it just goes into this boring, like, okay, I'm gonna sort of slowly meander around, maybe finding this thing, and this guy sort of tries to kill me, but I survive and kill him. Like that, it just meanders to that point.
Okay, I mean, I think obviously we all have our own interpretations, but I thought that one was.
I'm telling you my interpretation.
No, yeah, I hear you.
And then we enter into the wagon train one, which, again, I feel like, they're trying to go back to the black comedy, but no, it's really actually that's pretty dark.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's
dark. Like, there's no comedy at the end of it. That's just dark.
Looking back at the whole thing, that's definitely my least favorite one, even though I really liked it through most of it, up until it was such a downer ending, and I just kind of felt at the end of that like, well, I liked a lot of pieces of that, but overall didn't leave me with a good taste in my mouth. Now, that said, I think the final one, I think, is a lot of fun.
I thought that was, like, literally the worst.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So what am I missing?
That they're all on a train, a wagon to the afterlife because they're all dead?
They are?
Yeah. It's subtle for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I feel like, and you and I have watched movies for a long time.
It doesn't ever explicitly say that.
You can verify that I'm not like a person
to. Absolutely not. In fact, I think between the two of us, you frequently pick up on stuff like that more than I do.
Had no idea. I didn't understand what the hell was going on. I mean, I got like the conversations, and I saw the dialogue. Mm-hmm. And then they got to the thing, and they were all hesitant to go into the hotel. And then that was it. They all went into the hotel. Mm-hmm. So you're saying that was them entering the afterlife?
Yeah, it's kind of the wagon was sort of stand-in for the boat across the river Styx, so to speak. Now, I don't think the characters knew that until the end. And so
but that makes sense as to why there was this sort of weird, awkward hesitation of them going into the hotel, which I didn't get. I was like, oh, what's going to happen in the hotel? And then the last guy enters, and they're like, oh, they're all in the hotel.
Yeah. It's that one, I liked it not just because of that element, though, which certainly I wasn't aware of at the beginning. I thought back on it. I don't know that I even realized at the time while watching it. I think what it was is I pieced it together while puzzling over the ending. But I liked just the dialogue and the character study of the people having the conversation in the wagon. I don't know. I liked the dialogue of it. I liked the flow of it.
Well, I think that was part of my letdown. Is I did like that dialogue. but there was no payoff, and I guess I missed the payoff.
Well, and again, we could call that a fault of the movie because it didn't make it clear.
Yeah. Like, they ramped this back up. I'm good with what they're doing. Where does this go? And they all just walk in this hotel. Like, that's how I see it, at least.
Yeah. No, and I mean that. To be fair, like again, it's like you were saying earlier. Like, the movie has to be able to communicate its ideas. And if not everyone is able to pick up on what it's trying to say because it's too subtle, that's a failing of the movie.
Right. So I see all this, and I'm in on the dialogue. I like it. I think this is fun. And then they're like, oh, and here's the hotel we're at. They all go in. I get what you're saying. Like, I'm starting to pick up, like, oh yeah, the coachman leaves. There's more to it. But when I'm watching
refusing to stop the coach, can't stop the coach. Yeah.
And then they just go in, and that's like the end of the story. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just coming off of like a letdown of, what I thought was going to be my most favorite story. So, I mean, so I guess I should explore that a little bit, just like how it makes you feel. Like, you come in with the Buster Scruggs story, you're on a high. Go in with the James Franco story, and okay, you're getting it. Like, okay, it's not all going to be fun like this. Like, this one's a little darker, but like, yeah, it was kind of fun. And then it starts to get darker because all of a sudden you go into this, and you hit this weird pace of like, what is this with Liam Neeson and this, quadriplegic guy?
I think that one still it's just super. I think it's still intended to be at least a little bit funny. It's like, it's very black humor.
Yes.
But essentially, this guy
works, but it also disturbs the rest of the movie because of like how intense it is.
Yeah.
Because it's so different than the first two. Like, it's a weird pacing from the first two into that one. And yes, it's kind of funny, but also super uncomfortable.
I just liked the thematic stuff in it, because the story in that one is that we have this incredible performer who is very good at doing a specific thing and utterly helpless in any other area of life. And ultimately, he's replaced by a tic-tac-toe playing chicken because the world does not care about the performing of Shakespeare and these eloquent speeches. The world doesn't care. The world wants to see the chicken.
Yes, I thought all those parts were hilarious. Like, and it drums it up with this whole, like,
I think it was counting chicken.
A couple of times where he would come to the point where he would hit this climactic sequence, lower his head, and everybody would start to clap. And then, and he would launch back into it. Like, yes, I get it, but I mean, it's still just this sort of awkward ending where he's like, well, fuck, the chicken's worth more than you, so I'm going to drown you. Like, I mean, it is, yes, it's darkly funny, but you're starting to move the tone, and what you thought was a palate cleanser, like, I felt like sort of just kind of pulled the cord on the movie. Because I didn't resonate with the prospector story.
Yeah. See, I felt like that one for me was like all of these pieces, all of these things were exploring pieces of what the Western means in the American consciousness in some ways. And I feel like the first one is, the classic, cowboys and the singing cowboy, and contrasting that with the, the violence that is inherent to those movies too. And then of course you've got the outlaw aspect of it, and then the changing times in a very bleak black humor sort of way. But the Prospector one was the one of all six that really was depicting the beauty of the natural environment there, and depicting this area that he loved it because it was so pure and untouched, and he was able to resonate with that and wanted to be in harmony with nature, except that he's also coming to build a gold mine. And there's this cognitive dissonance.
And there. Once he does, somebody tries to snake it from him.
Yeah. Yeah. And
which angers him to his core.
Well, especially because it wasn't. I mean, especially just because it wasn't even just someone came to rob him. They shot him in the back.
Right. You shot me in the back. I did all the work.
Yeah. So the idea that someone sat back and watched him spend 2 weeks finding where the gold is and where he should dig, and then digging a big hole until he finally found some gold, and then someone comes in to steal it. And so watching him do all of that hard work puts us in his shoes to say that's why that guy is that much worse, because he did let someone else do all the work and then try to come in and steal it from shooting someone in the back.
You convinced me. So, yeah, the reason I was frustrated with that one is because the build-up took so long.
Yeah. But
the build-up was necessary to get the payoff.
It's fair also, though, to feel bored during that payoff. Like, I didn't personally, but I get how that could be an honest reaction to that sequence. I enjoyed the landscape of it enough that was keeping me from being too bored. But at the same time, certainly not everyone's going to have the same reaction to it, though. But I mean, that's what I liked about it, though, is that it was moving away from the darkness of humanity that we had just seen in the last one with the performer, and going to the pure, untouched wilderness, and seeing this guy who wants to be in harmony with nature because he doesn't like people.
Yeah, you tell a good story. Like that.
Well, but then the Wagon Train one, as we kind of discussed, I feel like
that one, I mean, that made me legitimately sad.
Yeah. Well, the frustrating thing was too that it just felt like I was liking it right up until the end, where it just said, "Nope, we're going super bleak here."
Right, when it didn't seem necessary to what the story we thought they were telling.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's building this narrative of, oh, she lost her brother. Oh, she's in this qualm of can't paying her man.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this guy she sort of started to kind of confide in has created this plan that, I could actually marry you, and this could go on, and then you have the disruption, which you expect.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, she went to go get the dog, and now they're in a problem with the Indians and all that. Okay, well, what we expect, just the way that we're expecting, is that they will resolve.
And the frustrating thing is, I feel like if we sat here and we really talked through it, there is so much interesting nuance in there, and yet it's all in service of, nope, nobody gets anything good, everybody's sad, and they all die. Or, at least not everybody dies, but if the ones who don't die are super sad.
Right. Well, and it kind of punches you in the heart a little bit of the movie trope of, oh, there's the surprise, you thought you won, and then the bad guy comes back.
Yeah. Well,
but you get him.
Yeah.
And so our sort of pseudo hero
Mm-hmm.
killed the Indian, savage who has come back to life. But what he doesn't realize is that in the fact that that guy came back to life, it made our heroine shoot herself in the head.
Mm-hmm. Because he had told her, "Don't let yourself be taken alive."
Right. So he told her, "This is why this is what has to happen." And then we have sort of this like normal trope of, "Oh, like we thought we had everybody, but we didn't have him. Well, I got him. Oh shit. By him coming back alive, she killed herself."
Yeah.
And it's just, it hurts. It hurts so much more because of that. And I think it's a good job of them.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Well, and see, that was kind of my reaction too. Like, I think there's nuance in that scene. Like, for example, the fact that she kills herself because he told her that she should, if that's the situation. Yeah. So it's in some ways we see he is depicted in many respects as this classic, good-natured, old Western kind of hero type, and he's good at fighting the Indians, and he's honorable, and he wants good things and for good people and all of that, except that she dies at the end because of what he told her to do. And so it's kind of a piece of this this archetype that he represents of there's a dark piece of what he is that resulted in this unhappy ending. Also, I think that even though we have dangled in front of us the prospect that this good guy is going to save her situation by being willing to marry her and all of that, but I think her going after the dog at the end is supposed to be a little bit like the end of The Graduate, where their smiles fade, in the sense that, is she really actually that excited about being with this guy, or is she just realizing, I have zero other options, I don't know if this guy's going to be worth it, what's going on? I think that there is some uncertainty in her still, and that her being a little risky at the end, going off on her own, is maybe a reflection of her not being happy with her choices. Not that she was trying to die necessarily, but that she wasn't being careful because... So, but again, all of this is like between the lines.
That's a great point, because he specifically makes a comment about that earlier, about, I don't care if you hear the dog, like, you can't go out from the wagon train.
Yeah.
And so she agreed, I'm going to be with you. I agree, I understand not to go out from the wagon train. Making a deliberate choice to go into an incredibly dangerous area, which, they sort of paint like she didn't know that, in that there were prairie dog holes.
And the dog was her brother's dog that supposedly she didn't like, and supposedly she was supposed to be relieved when it leaves, right? Because it was barking and bothering people, and people held her responsible for that. And supposedly her brother was not really a great businessman. She was really kind of worried about him. Not that she wanted him to die, but in some ways, like, it wasn't going to be great. But then to risk all of this new potential happiness to go after this dog that, like, what does the dog actually represent for her? Why does she want the dog?
Well, yeah, I mean, she even said, like, to him, I mean, it's not like it was, like, sort of a surprise. Like, she said, like, when he proposed to her, she's like, well, now I'm the one who has to think a day on it. Like, she accepted it, ultimately, and we're excited about that because we like both characters.
We like
but we also recognize that, like, what the hell? What else was she gonna do? Like,
I think she identifies with the dog in the sense of feeling like nobody wants her. She's a burden, and she's lucky if anyone will take her.
Yeah, and I think that's what made this story the hardest one. I feel like this was probably one of the more complex ones.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I mean, I don't know that it. I think in some ways, if it finished with her implying that she's just going to go off and marry this guy and they'll be happily ever after, I think that would be a little bit of a letdown of the complexity in the story. But they could have finished it a little bit like, I mentioned The Graduate. They could have finished it with a little bit of a, is this really going to be that good? We don't know. They could have finished it like that without having to have it be super bleak at the end.
Right, with the feeling of like, oh, well, yeah, maybe this won't work out and I'll go do something else. As opposed to like, I shot myself too quickly because I'm also not in a good space.
Yeah, so I will agree that the ending of that in particular I didn't especially care for, and it did diminish that whole chapter for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
But so anyway,
it's time to wrap up because I have my dinner coming soon. So.
Well, I think it's a good time to wrap up anyway. So if you have listened or watched this, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll be back to update more once we've seen more movies. There's a couple more that we haven't talked about yet that we've both seen, but we're also going to try to see some more, and there will be some I'm sure that one of us has seen and the other will see, and we'll talk more. So in the meantime, see good movies, everybody.
See good movies. Good night.